Um, So slating for this class, this is Bob Arnold. Today is October 2nd, 2013. This is class 3 of a course called The Art of Interpretation, and we're here at Wisdom's Heart Center on Cape Ann. I put that at the top of all my note pages, the first page, so that I don't forget. I got in the habit. Then the only other habit I had to learn was to put the date in each time, otherwise I would read last week's date.
Oh,
So I'm learning all these little
good idea.
habit things, so I don't have as many things to think about and make it more plug and play. So the first thing that I wanted to do is to just quietly close our eyes, and we'll start with setting our motivation and doing just a short little meditation about that piece of it, and then we'll get into the more specific topics. So just watch your breath for a moment, just settle into your seat and see if you can sit without moving. We'll just call this the meditation on stillness, just not moving. Okay, so now just take a moment and think about all of the different things that you would normally be doing on a weekday evening, and how you chose to spend the time by coming to a class where we're going to look at some ideas that are 2,500 years old, and that you thought there might be something useful here, and you may have had a conversation in your head that meant something like, well, that's awesome, I can't wait to go, all the way to the fact that you got here. Probably the other extreme could be much more than, well, I probably don't want to go, but I'll drag myself there, or somewhere in between. And whatever got you here, you are here. And it's important before any teaching in Buddhism, we say, to set your motivation and think about why you're here, what you expect to get out of it, to try to set aside for a moment all of the things that have been taking your mind up, occupying your mind throughout the day, and just set those aside and try to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear and the heart to understand these teachings. Think about where in the spectrum of the next part you fall, and it could be anywhere from, well, it's just something to do, I thought it was kind of interesting, all the way up to, this stuff is really amazing and valuable. It has helped other people. Maybe it's already helped you, but somewhere in there you're hopefully seeing that it can be useful to you and you want to put it into practice. And then the next part that comes up is, can you actually do it? Can you make the time? Can you change your habits? Can you defeat one of the biggest demons, which is doubt? Doubt that you could do it, or doubt that it would work, even though you thought, well, it makes sense. And then the doubt creeps in again. So see if that creeps up in your mind. And then as you go through the class, there's a possibility, as the first Panchit Lama described in a beautiful poem, about the idea of a devil and an angel inside of one person's own mind, debating, arguing back and forth about two ideas. The book is called Dangzin Changdep, and it's the debate between, you can call it good and evil, you can call it the devil and the angel. Probably a more literal translation is something along the lines of an idea that could transform how you see the world and help you get to a point where you end your suffering completely, arguing with, juxtaposed with the idea of seeing the world the way that most people see it all the time, a way that will continue to cause you suffering in the long run, whether you recognize it or not. And so those two kinds of ideas are what we're wrestling with here. And so another important idea to think about is that as we go through the teachings, when we talk about emptiness and we talk about some of the different aspects, in Buddhism we call it Buddha nature. In other religions it might just be the divine presence inside of you, or something along those lines. The idea that you're not hardwired to be a suffering person, that we're trying to crack open our understanding and come to the idea that, wow, I could achieve perfect happiness. And wrestling with those ideas and noticing the conversations in your head as we talk about some of these things. What pops up automatically for you? Does it throw you into, oh, that's silly, or that's good, or wow, how can I apply this in my life? And working with those ideas. So setting your motivation like that for the rest of the evening, saying, okay, I'm here and I'm going to make the most of it. So just take a couple of seconds again to just watch your breath and sit quietly. So open your eyes, and I guess the first question is, do you have any questions from the last two classes, things that have been rumbling around in your head that you'd like to ask or think about, or things that may have unfolded? Or
could I ask a question?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. About the burning building. I'm a very visual person, so that stayed with me, and I see 2 points in a building with a ladder that goes up.
So 2 ladders, just to, I'll recap
as
for you.
escape routes from the suffering or the pain body within. And so I'm just wondering if there are many other directions to find different ways through that, if there's only one way of escape when there's one suffering, or might be other paths.
So to recap, for those that weren't here or may not have watched the video or audio, we were using an analogy of thinking about a spiritual practice. And so one of the sort of foundation, we have to start with a common idea, is that we're in trouble, that there's a problem. It's not that we're perfectly happy and like, well, I've got nothing to learn, no need for anything. That we are in an existence that is unhappy or painful or stressful. Some common modern translations, I had started translating it this way, translating it literally like I was reading in Sanskrit, but teaching it this way in some classes to people, and just saying, life is stressful. People can wrap their heads around that. I'm not happy. Not like I'm unhappy we know there are people who are unhappy all the time. They try to commit suicide and they're locked up and in institutions or just at home and don't leave. On up to people who are like, I've got a mansion, I've got a trust fund. What are you talking about? And then, it's like, gosh darn it, the limo's late. They're unhappy, but at some level, we're all experiencing something. Or I had that 6-week vacation to the Bahamas, and then it had to end, even if it's just at that level. So that's the first sort of common ground we have to agree upon, is that this life, as the Buddha said, this life is suffering. Or anywhere along that spectrum that works for you. And so the analogy was that if you're in a building that's on fire, and I was using the analogy from the perspective of a firefighter, and that there's a point when they may tell you, abandon the building, meaning you don't fool around, you get out as fast as you can. You don't take any pieces of equipment with you, you just get out. And you may hear that command to abandon the building, because the building's on fire. So that's where we're in that situation. And if you're in a large building, it could be that different groups, they're called groups or battalions or areas, however they're divided up. One group is told, okay, you guys have to go to this place, follow this set of instructions. And another group would hear that on the radio, but they wouldn't follow those instructions because they wouldn't work for them. They're not on the right-hand corner, so going to the stairwell in the center and going down one flight won't work for them because they're on a different floor, and going to the stairwell will just get them into trouble. So they're, in one context, they're all in the building. But in another context, they can't follow the same set of instructions because the instructions aren't specific enough for them. And so their specific instructions are go to the C side of the building on the 3rd floor and go out the window where we have a ladder or an aerial tower or something. That's not going to work for the other guys because there's no ladder there. They have to go down and up this other way. So we were likening that to the idea of different traditions, different sets of teachings, different teachers even. You know? Well, my teacher told me this. Oh, geez, my teacher told me that, and that's the opposite. So we have to work with that. And it could even be very subtle distinctions. You know, both people may have the same teacher and study in a group together, and at an individual meeting be told, I want you to stop volunteering. And another person, I need you to go do more volunteer work on this project. And he's like, well, wait a minute, am I supposed to do more work or not do more work? It depends on the person and the individual situation. And so different spiritual practices are like that. You know, if you follow the teachings of such and such organization, then if they're authentic in a real spiritual tradition, it's been time tested, it'll work, and you can follow those. And at some point, you're now kind of in that corner of the building. You've already signed on, you're in there, and so it doesn't make sense to pick, oh, well, I don't want to walk up the stairs, I have too much, you know, I'm wearing 80 pounds of gear. I'd rather go down the stairs. Their instructions make more sense to me. In which case that doesn't work because going down is going to put you into the fire. So that's a little bit, so again, it's one of the things you have to take with a bit of a, is it literal, is it figurative, is it applicable to me? You know, or is it just generally a good idea that, oh, I follow this instruction, but oh, here's a different context. And when you look at, in Buddhism, there's some sets of vows that people say, okay, look, I understand that I'm planting bad seeds, they've gotten to that point, I want to stop planting bad seeds, that's the first thing I want to learn to do, and I want some help. So I'm going to follow a set of vows, you know, like don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, you know, there's like 10 of them. Those are the basic ones. And you're following those vows. And then there comes a time where someone says, I want to take some more vows. I'm at the point where I want to actually have vows that I'm going to help people, that are going to help me help others, and help me live a better life to move forward in my progress. And you'll have contradictions. You'll say, well, the classic example is, I have a vow not to have more than 10 yards of cloth. I don't know exactly. There's like a monk's vow. It's very specific. And you say, well, I'm not supposed to have more than 10 yards of cloth. And somebody comes along and says, here, I've got this truckload of cloth. Would you like it? And you go, well, I have a vow. It says no. Then you have another vow that says, well, geez, you know, I could take that cloth and I could hang on to it for like 6 months because I know there's a project and someone's going to be doing this and that, and I could use that. It's like, well, wait a minute, I would be breaking a vow, but if I don't do it, I'd be breaking another vow. So then it becomes a balance. So that's why this course is important, as you're learning, well, is that vow literal or is that vow figurative? Or does this vow take a precedence? So if they're both literal, then there's a problem because this one says do it, this one says don't do it, this one says do it. So they can't both be correct and followed. So you have to apply some logic to it and say, oh, well, you know, is there a hierarchy then? Does one vow take precedence over the other? And then does that mean I can just throw all my vows away? Or, well, I can't throw them away. So that's kind of like in the building analogy, you know, generally speaking, going up and down stairs or listening to the commander tell you things is a good thing. But then maybe in the last 30 seconds something changed. And you're like, oh, geez, something just fell down and collapsed. Well, but they told us to do that. Yeah, but, you know, a stairway just collapsed. We can't go up it. So then you have to use some more common sense. So it's a constant adjustment that you're making to try to follow what makes sense for you. And ultimately, in as we talk about it, or I talk about it, is it's your spiritual practice. So that's, again, another one of these push me, pull me. Well, it's my practice. I can do whatever I want. Well, no, you can't do whatever you want. But when your teacher says this, and you're on retreat, it's your retreat, you're following the instructions, and you go like, they told me to do this, 4 times a day. And you're like, well, my back is killing me, I can't concentrate, it's getting worse, and they told me I shouldn't be in settled down, and all these things. I go, well, okay. Then I fall back on, well, in the moment it's my retreat, so I'm going to only do my meditations twice a day. And then you have a beautiful retreat, and you go, well, but I failed because I didn't do what I was supposed to do. It's always with the caveat that you have to apply wisdom that you've learned and gathered and practiced with, and logic that you've practiced with. And given those particular circumstances. So this is why the Buddha said, take what I say and test it like gold. Those 3 tests, we're going to review those. So not do what I said because I said so. And that's so important, because we then have, there's actually a couple of reasons. One is, one they say is, if you listen to me and you think, wow, that guy's awesome, I'm going to do exactly what he said. And then, 2 weeks later you go to Mary Kay's class and she's a great teacher, and you listen to her and you say, she's like so much more charismatic. I like her. I'm going to listen to what she says. And you just bounce around and you've got no ground. If you're like, we both are, I would say, in the same lineage, so that probably wouldn't apply as much. But let's say you go to a totally different idea, and then you're just doing something different, and you're always starting but never following through. And so the Buddha said, somebody will come along, they'll be more charismatic than me. And then you'll just listen to them because they're more charismatic. So if that's why you listened to me the first time, then it wasn't good enough. You have to have it rooted in your own motivation and own understanding. And then it could even be somebody who's like totally uncharismatic, and just seemingly 9 out of 10 people will go, wow, they're a really crappy teacher. And you're going, yeah, but I'm getting jewels and pearls of wisdom, because it's coming from your ability to hear it. So that's why you're always wanting to be responsible for yourself. Another one is, even if what I say is correct, and even if following it will help you, and you don't come across anybody else more charismatic, you don't bump into anybody else, and so you're doing it, you're not going to have the same motivation by doing it just because I said so. It's like, well, what the heck, I'll just try it for no reason. I mean, that's an okay reason to start. You got to take some leap and say, okay, I'll try it and see what happens. But at some point, we're trying to get to the place where it worked a little bit, and you recognize that, wow, you kind of noticed some things. I'm feeling a little better, my life isn't going all awry, or something has shifted. And then you say, wow, if I do a little more of this, it'll work better. And you get what they call the confidence from having seen the results. And then you'll have the desire, I want to do more of this. And that becomes a really powerful motivation. And then what will happen is someone will come along and go, oh, Bob, he's an idiot, you should never listen to him. And you'll be like, dude, it's not, you can say anything you want, it's not going to faze me. It would be as if I were to try to convince you right now that you're in Los Angeles. And for the people in the audio tape, Rockport is on, Massachusetts. It's north of Boston. It's nowhere near Los Angeles. So I could try until I'm blue in the face to convince you you're in Los Angeles. You already know you're not. There's no point in me trying to do that. And another way to say it is the effects of the naysayers and other problems will be like flies on a rocket ship. It's going to have no impact on you. It won't change you from your course, because you've set it out and said, this is working for me, I'm going to work on this for now, I'm going to give it 3 months, and then you see the results, you go, wow, this is awesome. And then there's no swaying you. And then your motivation becomes, rather than a downward spiral, oh, life is terrible, you try something, it doesn't work, you do the wrong thing, you don't understand why, it gets worse, you get depressed, and it's a downward spiral. Instead, it's an upward spiral. Wow, this is really amazing stuff, this worked, this was valuable. Wow, I'm going to do it some more. Wow, it's working more. My life is better. I want to go to more teaching. Oh, this is really cool. And that's really what it's about, is to find something that will help you live a happier life. It's not become a Buddhist. That's not the goal. The goal is to find something that makes you happier. And then you put it in a context. I taught a course in January, I think it was, I can't remember how long ago it was, where it's about the Buddhist cosmology from an old book called the Abhidharma Kosha. And we spent 10 classes on things that most people never think about. And most people a few people asked me, oh, what are you teaching? And I told them, like, oh, it's kind of hard to even explain it. You don't tell them all of what it's about, because they go, well, that's just too depressing. It's about death and hell. It's like, oh, well, that's just weird. That's why I left such and such place, because they were talking about punish. It's not about that, but they don't have the context to put it in. Another way to think about it is little by little, whatever it is you're doing. One of the great Buddhist saints, Master Shantideva, talks about how we can overcome any obstacle and learn habits, but we can't walk in. I mean, we could, some people might, but generally speaking, you're not going to walk into a Buddhist class, hear an advanced teaching that says, yes, you need to do this practice 6 times a day, and you need to do this, and you need to do that, and go, boom, I'm done, I'm happy, I'll do it, and succeed at it. Most people are going to go like, well, I'll give it a try, and they'll fail, and then they'll think they're a loser, and then they won't do it anymore. So if you start out small, well, I can do that once a day. And if I miss it, then it's like, okay, I'll probably miss it, and then you work up, and it's like, then you do it regularly, and you learn new practices, or, like a really tough one is to just be happy for an hour. Like, you go to work and you say, I'm going to go to that meeting, and I'm going to be happy when they're all arguing about things. And you realize how hard that is. So an advanced teaching would be to just be happy all the time. One of my teacher would say that to people. It's like, just be happy. And you're like, how can you tell them that? That's why they're here. They can't. They're having a hard time doing that. But that's ultimately the answer. Just be happy. But how hard that is to do. So I hope that's kind of fills in what you were asking. Okay. Okay. I hope that explained the analogy.
No diamond deals.
Yeah.
Multiple choices, multiple paths.
Yeah. Yeah. And as the Dalai Lama says, if you already have a tradition that's working, stick with it. I mean, his information, same teachings, it's useful. But if you don't have a path, then you'll bounce around a little bit, and you'll try different things. And in Tibetan, there's a saying that you'll be like I think it's a dakchen. It's the Tibetan word for a little tiger, which is about a bumblebee. And so you go around from flower to flower and flower and try different things. But they say at some point you have to settle on something. Otherwise, your practice won't be very strong. It'll be very dilute. And so you spend some time. And in the old days, they would say that it takes 12 years to find a teacher. Not very many people practice that anymore. We're too, we don't have time. We got to get going. I want it now. I can't even wait till tomorrow, some people would say. And then they get the teacher, and then they don't do anything. So it's like, well, you could have waited anyway. You check it out. You use a little bit of wisdom and try it on. It's not like you're signing a stone contract that says I'm going to be practicing this forever. But it doesn't do anybody any good to say, well, I'll just kind of, half-heartedly try something. So you use a little wisdom, and at some point you have to take a little bit of a leap. And that's the whole quandary that people are in, is they're frequently born into a tradition or come across one at some point, and then feel like they're not allowed to change. They say, oh, I have to do this, or I failed at it, or, in Buddhism, we would say that we've been going through countless lifetimes. It's not just, I was just born, say my birthday, and that's when I started. We would say we've been going through, our mind has been traveling through since beginningless time. And if that's true, and a lot of what karma is habit. So we have pretty strong habits. Like for me, I was not initially raised as a Christian. I was just in a neighborhood that there were a lot of Roman Catholics, and I was the outcast. I was a Christian, but I was an outcast because I wasn't Roman Catholic. And I was like, I knew right away at a little kid age what discrimination was. And you think, well, it's like, is that any different, to the person who doesn't understand why they don't like them for some reason that doesn't seem to make any sense to them, than, if my skin were black, or, we had sort of these sacred cows that this discrimination is worse than this discrimination, or this suffering is worse than this suffering. There's a great question Lama Ruda asked is, there's a girl whose grandmother and mother had both gone to the same college, both been in the same sorority, And she was raised and told since the time she could understand, oh, you're going to go to such and such college, and you'll be in the, Delta Kappa Happy, whatever it is, you'll be in that fraternity. Sorority, yeah. And, so she does whatever she has to do to try to get in, and they don't let her in. They say, no, we're not going to take you. And she's crushed. Is her suffering somehow less? Like, there's no objective meter you can take and put on somebody, like, in Star Trek, and scan them and they go, oh, they're on a scale of 1 to 100, they're at a 92, and she's over here and got a sore leg and is only a 36. There isn't any way to do that. It's our sense of it for us. And this is why we get into such trouble when someone goes, well, it's just spilt milk, why are you crying? To them it's important. So it's from the person's own side. There's no objective sense that we can use to measure that kind of thing. And the same thing applies to our choices. So we don't know what habits we have come with. I was then raised and introduced to a tradition and taught by a wonderful scholar. And it all made sense. He was a great teacher, and I listened, and I did really well, and I memorized all the books, and I knew all the things, and, I went through the rituals, and, my heart wasn't in it. Now, was that just because I was a bad kid and didn't study well, or it wasn't something? And then there was a time where a seed ripened. We call it a bakchak in Tibetan, and it ripened in a big way. And it was like, bam, that was it. No question. I didn't have any doubts for me. So that's another piece, I think, to what I hear the question being. That's part of what you're trying to figure out. And that's a path. That is the path, actually. That's the beginning of it. We think, well, here's a classic one, is you decide to go to a retreat. Say, example, the summer retreat. And you say it starts August 12th. So you think, it's only June 5th. The retreat hasn't started yet. You've already started thinking about going. The retreat has already started. Things will start happening. Oh, well, then my vacation time isn't. All these other things. Well, do I want to go or not go? You've already engaged in that process. So you're in the same way at that point. You're saying, well, I'm thinking about spiritual paths. You're already on a path. You're a path of seeking. And then it will narrow down, and then you'll come to one that will speak to your heart, hopefully. You'll hear it and recognize it, and you'll be like, oh, cool. And you'll try it on, and then you'll be well on your way then. But it sounds like just the questions you're already asking, you're on your way. And that's a good place to be. Again, assuming you're like me, and living in what we call samsara and one way out. If you're already a Buddha or an enlightened being, then, then it's just an opportunity for me to practice. And that's a possibility. So,
thank you.
Any other questions? That was a good one. Yeah.
Good answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So, let's see. So what we've done is we did a little bit about what we call the pen and chew toy, or emptiness. And that one, for this class, is important because the majority of this subject is ultimately about our understanding of emptiness and making subtle distinctions. And we talked about different schools, and not as in this school has this team mascot and plays against this school with this mascot in football, and I'm in this school and I'm in that school. It's more of in my mind, like a genre, as in I'm thinking about, that's a science fiction book, or oh no, that's a mystery novel. In terms of a way of thinking about things. That's probably, that analogy probably breaks down pretty quickly, but the idea that it's not a club that you joined or a school that you went to, it's a way of thinking about something. And one school's way of thinking about emptiness and another school's way of thinking about emptiness. And it all started when the Buddha gave his first teaching, and that's what we call the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And he said things have a self-nature and they exist out there and life is suffering and a whole lot of other things. And then in the second turning of the wheel, he said, nothing has any nature. And then there was a bodhisattva who went up to him and said, now, let me ask you a question. First, you said there's these things with this nature and things are the way they are and life works this particular way. And then you said nothing has any nature at all. Could you explain yourself? And then he did that's what triggered what they call the third turning of the wheel. And the third turning of the wheel is when sometimes they describe it as subtle distinctions. He made distinctions about things. And he said, oh, well, when I said this in the first turning, I meant that. And when I said this in the second turning, I meant this. And, so I was being either figurative or literal. And then we broke out into some categories to look at those. And in the two schools that we're looking at, one is called the middle way school, and the other one's called the mind-only school. And we quickly pointed out that mind-only doesn't mean that they believe everything exists in your mind. In fact, they laugh at the other guys and blame them for saying, oh, you think everything's in your mind. So they really should be called the anti-mind-only school, but, or at least for me, that's what I would name them if I were in charge, but I'm not, so. And they look at different aspects of the idea of the emptiness, the pen and the chew toy, and it's those understandings that we're trying to get to. So we could say, oh yeah, it could be a pen, or it could be a chew toy, or this is a water bottle. No, I can take the cap off and I can put a flower in it because someone brought me a flower and I'll use it as a vase. And the question is, like when we do the pen and the chew toy, we did the pen, I see it as a pen, dog sees it as a chew toy. And do we understand that for the dog, it is a chew toy? Or do we think that the dog is chewing my pen? And a way to try that out is, I think I have a pen, I've seen this a number of times in teachings where someone will say, okay, here's another way of practicing looking at emptiness, because this is our holy grail. This is what we're trying to get such a really deep understanding of, that it will shift us in such a profound way that we are what they call a stream enterer. We're on a conveyor belt out of suffering. It's so powerful. And without it, we won't get into the deep parts of it, but basically you could say, one way of putting it, well, I'll put it kind of bluntly, is you've squandered this life. From the Buddhist perspective, is if you're trying to study, that's the one thing that will have made it worthwhile, is if you see that experience directly, if you have that experience. So we try all kinds of ways. Does it have parts? Oh, okay, I know. I'll think of it as a pen. And then I'll strip away my idea of it being a pen, and I won't see it as a pen anymore. And then I'll see it as a chew toy. And I'll stop seeing it as a chew toy. But ultimately, most of us, we can stick it in our mouths and chew on it and go, yeah, hey, that chew toy, okay, I got it. We're really deep down still saying, it's a pen and I'm chewing it. Or it's a pen and I'm pretending it's a chew toy. Or it's a pen and I can use it as a chew toy. And there's subtle distinctions there that we're not making. We're not looking at it as a chew toy. So I'll give you another one. I didn't bring an example. So we'll do this. This will be like a double layered one. Let's pretend that this is a chopstick. Okay, like so when you see this will be a chopstick, an actual chopstick, like you would get in a Chinese restaurant. So for me, there was a point where I didn't see these as chopsticks. I'd have dozens and dozens of them around in the workshop I worked at, and I didn't see them as chopsticks. And somebody came in one day and said, what do you do with all the chopsticks? And I had to stop and think, because I didn't know how to answer the question. I was like, what chopsticks? Literally, is what came, it happened more than once. Once it came out of my mouth, but generally it would be like, yeah, chopsticks. We use them as pegs. They're pegs. And we would talk to each other and say, hey, you got any of the large pegs or the small pegs? I need a couple more, cut me about a dozen large pegs. I need some more small. Do we have enough? We're packing up for a trip down to to a class we're doing at the boat school. Okay, we have enough pegs. We got the large. Oh, we gotta get small pegs. We didn't say, do you have small chopsticks? But was it that we were just using different words? Like I could learn the French word for pen. I don't know, what is it, la plume or something? So I could call it la plume. It's just a different word, but it's still, well, it's a French word for pen. So it's still a pen. But what if I learned a foreign word for chopstick? Am I just learning another word, but to me it's still a pen, or in this case a chopstick? I'm just calling it a peg. I'm just calling it a different sound, but it's a chopstick, and then I cut it up and do things with it. It literally, for me, became a peg. Unmade pegs and then, custom fit pegs. It's that kind of a shift that can happen in your mind. It's that kind of level of understanding that, oh, wow, that could actually be useful. Because then I can realize it isn't really from its own side a chopstick. And we'll get a little bit more into that in a few minutes. So that's the kind of understanding we're thinking about. We're constantly looking for things to say, oh, like today somebody laid out 5 key rings, large key rings on the desk to cover the pieces of paper that were on it because she didn't want them all blow away. They weren't key rings. They were paperweights. That's a teaching in emptiness. But we miss those things. Once you start to see them, then you start to see them everywhere. It's like, oh, she's practicing emptiness. Because she has to be. Because if she thought of them as key rings, she would only be able to put keys on them. But at another level, if I said, what are those? She'd go, oh, they're key rings. But I'm using them to keep the papers from blowing away. So we don't jump in all the way and go, well, they're paperweights. So it's that kind of deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper understanding. And I've heard lots of different numbers, and the ultimate point I think is just that you just have to keep hearing it over and over again. There's no actual number like 3,000 hours of teachings or 3,000 hours of teachings of emptiness. That'd be more specific. And then suddenly the number changes to 5, and then it changes. It's like you just have to keep hearing it until it works. And it will start to work subtly, and it will start to work little by little, and then you'll have bigger understandings of it, deeper understandings of it. And they say that if you get a deep enough intellectual understanding of this concept of emptiness in this lifetime, you actually won't take a lower rebirth. In Buddhism, the lower rebirths are being born as an animal. There's a thing called a hungry ghost or a preta or craving spirit. Kind of like, what was his name, Jacob Marley, who wanders around dragging chains because he didn't want to leave, kind of thing. And just full-on beings in hell. A really unpleasant place. And you can avoid those because with the wisdom of understanding, what happens is you stop planting the seeds to put you there. It's not that it's something magical.
I was just trying to test to see what it looked like.
Sorry. So it's not that there's this magical thing out there that someone's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, oh, now you won't have a lower rebirth. It's literally cause and effect. You stop putting the causes into place and you start working on changing things. It's still ultimately your responsibility and your work. So it isn't that, oh, I've got a deep enough understanding, well, suddenly something changed for me. It's that you've changed already. You've been changing, and that's how you got to that point of that kind of understanding. So that's another a roundabout way of saying a little bit about the motivation of why we study this subject. This subject, because we talked about before, you could very easily go, well, wait a minute, I've decided I'm going to sign the card and become a higher way understanding of Buddhism. I want to be middle way school. I've just decided that's what's for me. So I don't want to study the mind-only school. It's inferior. It's not correct. It's bad. It's lower. Well, we don't want to get into those kind of things. Ultimately, the question is, if that's all you studied, then you have to be careful, because some of us have vows not to say bad things about the school. Again, it's not a school with a mascot and a football team, but it's about the understandings and the mindset that people have. Because ultimately, probably all of us are in that school right now. We're thinking about, oh, this room's too hot, or it's too dark, or it's too light, or he's talking too much, talking not enough, or it's too loud, too quiet. Whatever it is, those are all things that are coming from things out there. in the mind-only school's way of thinking. We fall into this school of thinking all the time. And again, that's from the middle way point of view, so we're constantly switching hats. But if you're in the middle way school and you talk about how you are in the world, if you are upset about something, from the middle way school's point of view, you're not in the middle way school at that time. You are in the mind-only school. It's not possible that you're rooting for the mascot of the middle way school if you have a mental affliction, something upsetting you. If you're upset about something, you are falling into the trap of the habits that come from having gone to a lower school. Think of it that way. Oh yeah, I went to the prep school for that school and I learned to root for that team, and those are the habits that you have. You can imagine if you had grown up in classic, New York, and you lived there for 40 years and you rooted for the Yankees, and then you came to Boston and you said, I'm going to root for the Red Sox. And the Red Sox play the Yankees, you probably cheer when the Yankees hit a home run. You're like, oops, wrong team. Just out of habit. It's kind of like that. We're so ingrained in these habits. And so why we're studying this stuff is to understand the habits that we have already, not because it's not useful information. It's not that it's wrong and it's a waste of time. It's that's where we fall all the time. That's our habits throw us into that. And if we understand it better, then we'll be able to catch it sooner and work with it. Instead of just saying, well, I belong to the higher middle way school. I'm a Manjumika, Prasangika. It's like, I don't need to study that stuff. And already you're thinking, self-existently it's better, and just because I joined, it's like there isn't even one to join, and you're already mixed up. Ultimately you're still living in the old school way of thinking. Because that's probably where most of us are, most of the time. But on the other hand, now I'm saying most of us, meaning most of us studying at all, struggling with this. Most people, like the 6 billion other people on the planet, they're not even at that level. So if they were at that level for real, that'd be pretty damn good. To be able to say, I'm thinking about emptiness and I have deep understandings. They're not idiots, by the way. They're not like a stupid school. They're really, really smart. It's not quite complete enough to get you there. At least that's the middle way school's point of view. And then some people would say, well, if you're a mind-only school, of course they have understandings of emptiness, and they can, then that's when you have to really start debating it. But you got to get your feet wet and really have a good foundation of what the heck are we talking about? Who are the players? Because it's kind of like all of the two schools are playing a rugby or football game or something, but they're all wearing the same jersey. And you're trying to figure out, wait a minute, which one's which? And you're mixing them back and forth. You have to at least get everybody wearing two colored jerseys, and then you can go, oh, okay, wait a minute, that's why this is going that way. Oh, that's why he's carrying the ball that way. Oh, okay, that's not the wrong thing to do. It's the right thing to do for him. Oh, now I understand it better. So that's the process of what we're wrestling with. And again, just in a context, in the series of courses that one of my teachers put together, this is course 15 out of 15. And this is when he taught it after we've already got a deep background of lots of things. Again, it's not like, oh, I'm missing something so I shouldn't be here. It's perfect. Because now you go around, if you want to learn more, you go, oh, now I already know what to watch for. Which jersey am I wearing at this point? And you can start thinking and asking those questions from that perspective. And at any level, you could be totally engaged in a totally different tradition, and general concepts like testing it like gold. What does that mean? Is that useful? Can I do that at a board meeting? Sure. Just use those same principles. We can apply them in our own lives, and they're useful even from that perspective. Okay. So the literal and figurative, just to kind of run through a few things. We talked about expressions, things people say. Does what they say match what they meant? Literally or figuratively, those are the words. Oh, what he said, there's one computer on the desk. Oh, okay, that matches literally what I said. Okay. If I said, oh, there's like, or I could put this on the table, and then I said, oh, there's one computer on the desk. Am I being literal or figurative? Well, I meant, or I could say two, because I meant this is a computer, it's processing power, not necessarily like has a keyboard. So then you can say, oh, was he being literal or figurative? Does it match what I was saying? And then, why did the person say that? Did they mean something else? When the Buddha said the things that he said, was there a reason for it? As you study Buddhism more and more, you get to see that the Buddha didn't waste words. He was very careful. So he didn't just say stuff for the heck of it. There's usually, there's always a good reason. Even if it is so that when we study it, it'll help us. And then we talked about reality. We had the little rocks. And we said, is reality fooling us? Or is reality being literal? And we had a reality, an example of a figurative reality. A good one is, sometimes somebody will have a gun, like a little pistol, and it's actually a lighter. So the reality of it is different. So it's a literal or figurative. It's literally a lighter, it's figuratively a gun, it's fooling us. It wasn't really a gun. And then understanding. Are we understanding something correctly? A week or two ago, we were driving in the car, and Judith said, oh, there's a German, we're in traffic, and it slowed down. Said, someone hit a German Shepherd dog on the side of the road. And, that's what I felt. Oh, that's really sad. And then we got closer and realized it was a piece of cardboard, and people were slowing down because there were like cops directing traffic for something else, 20 yards in front of that, but we hadn't seen it. And it turns out it wasn't a dog, it was a piece of cardboard. So that's what we call not a valid perception. She had a picture in her head of a German Shepherd that had been injured, but the picture didn't match reality. And then this is where you can get really slippery. So we say, there's a Tibetan phrase we can pull out, matak mache, but don't go any deeper. Because then you can say, well, wait a minute, reality, was it really cardboard, and was this, and on and on and on. Or there's the story about you go into a dark room and you see something coiled up. You go, oh my God, there's a snake, be careful. And you're afraid. And then eventually somebody comes with a lamp and you see that it's a coil of rope. So literal, it was just figuratively. Our image didn't match reality. And then you can argue, well, there never was a coil of rope. That's a famous one, you've heard that one. So, we're not going to go that deep. We're just at the level of, is it appearing as a rope or not? And then the other one is do we have an approximation? So one is do we have a valid perception? Like the cardboard box, I thought it was a germ, it wasn't even a valid perception. So literal and figurative in one sense is like not applying there. I just didn't even have a valid perception. And then there's the approximation. I can describe, well, like the example, we didn't actually go and visit a burning building that was on fire in this fire school, and they had ladders, and it's like, oh, here's what's going to happen. It's like we just made that up in our heads. We had an approximation of it. We had an understanding. Like, okay, I kind of get it. Yeah, okay, that works. Or pen and chew toy. Yeah, okay, I get it. Chew toy. It's an approximation. I don't actually see it as a chew toy. Or for me, like I could bring it. Let's say this was the chopstick. See, peg. See, I cut it and I show you how to put it in the hole. And you're like, oh, okay. You still see chopstick, but I got a gist of how it could be a peg. I could, take it. It's wood and it would go into the hole. And I can pound it in. And, oh, okay. And then we talked about the 3 tests. Burn it, cut it, and use a touchstone. In other words, check it against your own experience. And these are the really important things to take away from this class, I think, is just having a tool that you can use for yourself. Somebody says something, and you don't just have to decide, well, do I believe him or not? There's some ways, I gotta believe him, and there's the caveat that unless something else comes along that dissuades me. Like I did not believe Judith when she said there was a dog hit on the side of the road. I didn't go, wow, she's what she's talking about. She's got bad eyes, or she's always saying that kind of stuff. I believed her until other information came along. Then I was happy to change my point of view. In that case, very happy. So we're going to try things out, and we say, okay, does it match my understanding? Now I didn't have any visual data. She was on this side of the car. I'm on this side of the car. I couldn't see it. I was like, I didn't see it. Ooh. So I couldn't even argue and go, well, I don't think it was. No, it must have just been cardboard. You know, it's like I have no way of doing that. So I had to skip that step. I couldn't use that step. Logic. Well, are there such things as German Shepherds? Do they ever come on the road? Is there some impossibility that it could ever have been on that road? No. I can't prove that it's true. Like, I saw the German Shepherd on the sidewalk. He didn't make it to the other side of the street. The cars are still going. He's not on the side. Obviously, there's no logic I could use to prove it one way. But with logic, I could say it's a possibility. It's like, okay, still not completely helpful. And then, do I, touchstone, do I have it on good authority? Now, here's where it also gets tricky. Because you say, well, the Buddha said, this is the teaching. It's like, well, yeah, good authority, but wait a minute, there's a whole class about, was he being literal or figurative? So, you have to use that one even wisely. So if it's something that the Buddha said that you've then tested and applied other tests to it, and then you go, okay, that matches, and then this is consistent with that, and in the context, or like I trust the person who told me this, so I'm going to count that as an authority. It wasn't somebody who just makes stuff up, like the little kid in the back seat going, "Oh look, there's a spaceship." It's like you don't look and go, "Really?" So that's another way of thinking about those kinds of things. This? Okay. So you can probably think of some ways that would be helpful in our everyday lives. We talked about the 3 turnings of the wheel. Okay. Then another aspect of what we call the mind-only school that's important we talked about were the 3 attributes when we talk about literal and figurative. And in the sutra where the Buddha commented on all the other sutras, he laid out this is where the mind-only school says, this is their justification for their theories. They're saying, oh, I understand it this way. When he taught this sutra, he's being literal, and there's a whole thing. So he talked about constructs, things like our images, our mental images. And then dependent things, we're changing things, and then that gets to be a lot of synonyms that mean different things depending on which school you're applying the logic to. But generally, most of the things that we see during the day, the things around us, reality, and then something they call totality. Totality being an understanding, that's their code word for emptiness. So when we talked about the pen and the chew toy, we said this cylinder is empty of being a pen. I bring the pen nature out to the cylinder. It's not coming at me, right? So that's the big question. When we see something, we should ask ourselves, is it coming at me or is it coming from me? That's the kind of thing you can ask every day. That's a water bottle coming at me, right? No, it's a water bottle coming from me. And how often do we forget that? And so the fact that this is empty doesn't, the construct of pen, the mental image of a pen, is not automatically applied. It's not a God-given right of this cylinder to be called a pen for me to apply that construct to it. And the proof of that is that the dog applies a different construct. But in the mind-only school, that's different than the understanding of the middle way school. The mind-only school is saying that's emptiness. The fact that the construct in my mind, pen, isn't applied as self-existently onto this cylinder. But then they get to the point where they say the fact that it is what it is coming from it. It is this thing, and then I have the construct pen and I'm applying it to the pen. And that makes sense because it is a pen. So it's a little bit tricky. So on one level, it's not a pen from its own side, but on another level, that's the construct pen. But it It is this. It couldn't be anything else. And that's the part where we struggle. And we very quickly fall back into mind-only school. Well, it is what it is. And we apply that to our body. Well, it is my body, and it is made with this flesh and bone, and it will get old. And you'll hear this all the time. I just heard somebody talking about it today and said, but that's just a part of getting old. You know? So the part of getting old, it's just natural. I had somebody say this the other day too. It's just natural. When you get old, that's going to happen. It's just natural. You're going to be creakier and slower to get up, and you'll have these problems. Your memory, or whatever the attributes that you apply to it. Does that come from the mind-only school? The thing is the thing that it is. It has by definition, yes, getting old, my body has characteristics by definition that it will get old. The fact that I see it and apply my image, they would say, yes, that's something that you apply. That's the emptiness. Mind-only school would say that. Middle way school would say even the body is empty of having the characteristics that you think are naturally in the body. And if you don't have that understanding, and that's the deep end of the pool. So this is for some of us just scratching the surface, trying to understand this for me and much of us. So we fall back into the mind-only school very quickly. And without that understanding can get us out of the mind-only school, you can't practice the advanced teachings. You will be stuck. Your body will get old and will die. And there's no way out of it. Because it's natural that the body will get old. And we apply those things, the body will get old. Okay. So a couple more things. And then we'll take a break and discuss some things. So in the first turning of the wheel, the Buddha had said things have a definitive nature. The second turning of the wheel, he said they have no definitive nature. Then the Bodhisattva comes along and says, could you explain yourself? And you said things have nothing has a definitive nature of its own. And he said, well, when I said those things, I was speaking of three specific things. There are those constructs in your mind. There are changing things. And there are totalities. And those are the things I was talking about. Now the construct, it's in your mind. It doesn't exist out there. So if I were to talk about the 4,000-pound pumpkin on the floor over there, you have an image in your mind. So the construct exists, but it doesn't exist from its own side because it doesn't relate to anything in reality. And he was saying, yeah, of course, when I said nothing exists, I'm talking about those things. They're just constructs in your mind. Of course they don't exist. Yeah. And he said, there are things that are changing, and there are ultimate natures. The fact that the pen doesn't hold on to that construct of pen that you have, because it doesn't always apply just to the imaginary things aren't just non-existent. Like the 5,000-pound pumpkin is imaginary. Unicorns are imaginary. But this pen is not imaginary. This water bottle is not imaginary. But the annoying boss, okay, very quickly, wait, is the annoying boss imaginary? Or is that the construct that I've applied to the person who is annoying from their own side? It's just the construct. So that's where you get to dig a little bit deeper. So the fact that the cylinder is not a pen, the construct pen, from its own side, is totality in the mind-only school. And that understanding won't get you out of jail. Okay? That's not enough. So that's why we want to go deeper and understand it more. All right, so what else did we talk about? All right. So for those of you that want to know the Tibetan, the constructs are called kuntaks. And sometimes knowing the Tibetan or the Sanskrit is just like another layer of making it confusing. But sometimes learning a foreign word is helpful because we might have to say 17 things to illustrate it, and then we can just say, oh, kuntak. And that can be handy, as long as we don't fall into a trap of thinking, oh, I know what kuntak and it exists out there. It's a thing. So I'll just mention it. And then the changing things that rely and depend on other things are the shenglongs. So you probably have heard these words before. And then the last one, yongjup, is the code word that they use for emptiness, which already we see is different than the emptiness of the other school, the two we're talking about. So it's hard, isn't it? You got to wrestle. It's like mental gymnastics, and it's just you just play around with it a little bit, and you get to understand it, and you go, oh, okay, and then you wrestle with it some more, and it's just little by little. And so that's why it's good to just keep going through it. Okay. All right, so let's take a 5-minute stretch break and let that cook, and then we'll dig in a little bit deeper.